Michael Mann, the director of Collateral and Heat.
You afraid of violence?
We're here for business. Violence is real expensive.
Miami Vice is the coolest movie of the summer.
I die if anything happens to you.
And one of the best of the year. Miami Vice, rated R, starts Friday.
Now, the latest guilty pleasure movie is the Miami Vice 2006 movie with Jamie Foxx as Tubbs and Colin Farrell as Croc. As I also call it, Miami Vice, the motion picture, or the Tubbs and Crockett movie. This one got bad reviews. So basically, like the TV show, it had, they take on, drug dealers, like most episodes of the show. Interestingly enough, there are parts of it that harken back to the Smuggler's Blues classic episode from the TV series. Some people preferred this movie to the TV show just because they didn't like Don Johnson, and they claimed that it had a storyline, which of course it did, and implying the TV show didn't. Apparently just because they didn't like Don Johnson. Well, the TV show had 5 years of storylines, over 100 of them. At least usually it had one. At least some definition of one in every episode. So what we have is a movie that some people said should have been called International Vice. Because as in Smuggler's Blues and The Prodigal Son, they went to Colombia. And what happened is, they do their negotiation with drug dealers posing as druggies and doing things to get, that I don't think everybody understood in some cases, to gain the drug dealer's favor. And of course, one thing that's interesting is they mentioned that, not everybody that grew up considering themselves Cuban if they lived in Little Havana or Cuba, including Asians, they thought that they were Cuban. They thought of themselves as Cuban. There's an Asian woman that considers herself Cuban, obviously not by blood, but so. And one thing about this movie, there's an interesting kind of sense, to some extent, of isolation and life on the edge. The repetitive but pretty song and relatable "One of These Mornings" by Moby featuring Patti LaBelle, that's used in the movie, and it lends itself to that sense of isolation and wanting to just go away. So it's like, does the bad guy get away? Does he die? Does he get arrested? And there's Audioslave music in it, or at least Chris Cornell music. Numb was a big song, and the very opening of the theatrical version reminds me of the show, because it's like boom, all of a sudden it's starting. But the first shot also reminds me of James Bond opening credit sequences. So I thought it was much better than nothing. I'm not saying it isn't a masterpiece. It could have been about 20 minutes shorter, and it was a bit tedious, but it's certainly watchable. Some people really liked it, including the dialogue. Some people say it's one of the worst movies they've ever seen in their whole lives. It has no style or substance. Of course it has style. I mean, it's a Michael Mann movie. And people even complain just because it didn't take place in the 80s. It's like, because Miami Vice was meant to be contemporary for its time, people associated it with the 80s. Because that's what it was, because it was contemporary for the 80s when it came out. Well, of course this movie is pretty contemporary. 2006 contemporary, and some people say it should have taken place in the 80s, and they say Don Johnson turned down a role in it because he thought it belonged to the 80s, which is understandable. But that's not a legitimate, not for some people like me, a legitimate, quality opinion gripe. I don't even really think it's a flaw. So it's a little sexually explicit. Michael Mann movies are always rated R, including this one. It's a little sexually explicit, and Gong Li, I couldn't always understand what she was saying, and but she was very businesslike, and she was a world traveler, and certain things are just, I think, too subtle for main audiences. It was interesting to look on this real crazy bad guy's face, and when he was, jealous and envious and murderously resentful. So basically, we have a movie that, at least, like any Michael Mann movie, and even the TV show Miami Vice and Crime Story, he even does have some atmosphere, but a lot of people, if they even got that out of it, that's all they got. So, all in all, it's not a bad movie, but you can't just be ready, because like any movie based on a TV show, granted it's from the same higher ups that brought us the TV show, it's a lot different. Granted, the video I got, the director's cut, Michael Mann says he didn't get into character development because Crockett and Tubbs have been well known enough, but I went in there expecting a whole different thing, and it really is. So I was a bit surprised about that. Some people say that the director's version pandered too much to those of us that are fans of the TV series, but that's pretty much all I got to say about it. This is George saying, save me the L seat. Until the next time. Ciao.